November in the city was gray, like wet chalk. Fog in the morning, mud during the day, streetlights and fatigue in the evening. I'd gotten used to our lives becoming even more mechanical in such months. Work, home, dinner, TV, where no one listens to the announcer anymore. Larissa and I lived a steady life, unhappily and not badly. A steady life is when you don't fight because you are out of energy, and you don't make up because there's no reason to. Larissa was a tormentor. She didn't just teach the children, she was the one who held the class together. A homeroom teacher isn't just about math or literature, but about other people's families, other people's habits, other people's tears, when you know more about other people's lives than you want to know. She's 37. In the evenings, she could sit over magazines and papers as if the fate of the country depended on it. I sometimes looked and thought, what depends on me? I worked in security. Settings, paperwork, checks, conversations with men who hate fairy tales and love. I've done this 100 times. This is also about responsibility, only mine usually smelled of dust and iron, and hers of children's jackets and chalk. We lived together for a long time. I was not a romantic and was never one to tell how my day went, without hearing a response. I thought that if everything at home worked, that was love. Paid for, bought, fixed, broke, fixed. At some point, she stopped sharing little things. I thought this was a normal adult family. Everyone has their own head, their own concerns. Words only get in the way. That day, she came later than usual, took off her boots at the door quietly, as if in someone else's apartment. I was in the kitchen, slicing bread. A meeting again? I asked, without looking up. Not really, she answered and walked past without kissing or touching shoulders. Before, she would at least touch shoulders. I looked up and saw she was holding a blue school folder with a sticker. The folder was wet around the edges, as if she'd been carrying it in the rain and clutching it to herself like a child. We have a problem in our class, she said, pouring herself some water. I nodded. A problem in her mouth could mean anything, from a girl's argument to a parent's fight at a meeting. One boy, Pashka, Pavel Sazonov, had suddenly skipped classes, was rude, and was like a stone in class. He used to be normal, but now it was as if he'd been turned off. She spoke quickly, in the familiar tone of someone used to delivering a report. Only at the end her sentence stumbled, as if she didn't know why she was telling me this. So what? I said. A teenager will outgrow it. She looked at me as if I'd said something inappropriate. He's 12, and he has a family. His mother left. They didn't just divorce, she disappeared. He has only one father. One father, I automatically clarified, not out of sympathy, but because the information demanded precision. And he, Larissa, hesitated, as if searching for the right word. He doesn't look like the kind of person who comes to school to yell. I called, he agreed to come in the evening. Today after school. Today I glanced at my watch. It's almost 7 o'clock. I'm going back. I still need to fill out a couple of paperwork and talk to him. That surprised me. Usually she hated coming home. School sucked the energy out of her, and she dreamed of nothing but lying down and keeping quiet, and then back in the evening in the cold and rain. Will you be there alone? I asked. And I was surprised that I asked. There's a security guard at school, she replied, and there will be more studying, but she has her own things to do. And a conversation isn't a meeting, it's just a conversation. She went into the room to change, and I stayed in the kitchen, listening to the water running in the bathroom. I didn't know what to do with it. There was no jealousy in me. She simply wasn't there, like some people have no ear for music. I rarely imagined Larissa as a woman outside the home. For me, she was Larissa, my usual self, in a robe, with a tired look. And then, for some reason, I got the feeling she was entering another life, where I wasn't in charge, where I didn't exist at all. She returned in a different coat, with her hair neatly pulled back, not for show, but the way she did when she wanted to look put together in front of people. Quote, "Will you have dinner?" I asked. I don't know, I won't be staying. That "won't be staying" would echo in my head for a long time, because it always means the opposite. When the door closed, the apartment became quieter, and for the first time in a long time, I wanted to turn off the TV. I sat, looking at the bread on the board and thinking that here we have a kitchen, a kettle, money for groceries, 2 adults, and yet it feels like there's a wall between us. I never considered this a problem until Larissa started taking her words to school and bringing home only fatigue. I didn't follow her or call. That wouldn't have been me. I simply cleared the table and went into the room, but I couldn't sleep. Too early for sleep and too late for life. Around 9 she came back. Usually she stumbles in, takes off her shoes with a heavy sigh and says, "I can't take it anymore." But here she entered quietly, carefully, hung her coat straight, like in the wardrobe, placed her boots parallel to it and only then went into the kitchen, as if she was afraid to step on something fragile. "So how is it?" I asked. She looked at me, and I saw a strange mixture in her eyes, fatigue and something else. Not joy, not excitement, more like tension, like after a difficult conversation that didn't end. Quote, "Fine," she said. "He came." "Father?" "Yes." She put the folder on the table, took out the sheets of paper, but didn't read them, sighing. "His name is Andrei Sazonov. He's calm, you see, not like most people." Quote, "What are most of them?" I asked, although I understood what she meant. "The ones who come in immediately. It's your fault, you're picking on me. My child is good, and you?" And he sat down and asked, "What can I do to make my son normal again, so that he doesn't make excuses, doesn't attack, just asks and looks like he really wants to help?" She said, "He looked like that," and then stopped herself, as if she realized it wasn't about school anymore. "And what did you tell him?" I asked. "That the child needs stability, that he needs a routine, that he needs to talk, that he can't ignore him." He was listening, right? And Larissa looked up at the ceiling, as if there was a hint there. He said that the house was empty, that his son comes home, throws down his backpack, closes himself off, and he doesn't know how to approach him. He says, "I'm a man, I can work, but I don't know how to talk." I smiled briefly, without malice, just like me. She looked at me sharply, and there was something unpleasant in that look. As if my comparison was inappropriate, as if I had intruded into her new little world. Quote, she said, "you just don't think it's necessary." The words hung in the air. I felt something inside me tighten. Not even offense, more surprise. She rarely spoke to me so directly. Usually everything was veiled, soft. Quote, "Well, you know, but this one was like a knife." "Okay," I said calmly. "And then what?" Larissa looked away, again began to shift papers, as if she was busy with her hands so as not to answer. I asked him to come again in a week. We agreed that maybe we would involve the school psychologist, but she stopped. "I don't think they need a psychologist there. A person there needs someone who doesn't look at him as if he's guilty." "Are you going to be that someone?" I asked. I asked evenly, without attacking, but inside I already understood. Yes, she is going to. "I'm the homeroom teacher," she answered. It was her salvation, a role, a shield. "Okay," I said, but carefully. "People are different. You shouldn't drag other people's problems home." She was silent, then quietly, "I'm dragging it anyway." And she went to the bathroom. She closed the door, not slamming, but softly. It was worse. A slam is an emotion, and softness is a decision. That night she lay down next to me, but I felt that she was not there. She lay on her back, her eyes on the ceiling. I turned to her. "Laurie's," I said. She didn't even turn around. "Are you tired?" "Yes. It's because of me." She was silent for a long time, and this silence was more honest than any answer. Then she said, "It's because I listen to other people's families every day and come home to mine, and there's silence." I wanted to answer, but I couldn't find the words, because I always considered silence a blessing, but for her, silence was emptiness. The next day, life went on as usual. I went to work, she went to school. Only a small splinter had already appeared in my head. Andrei, the calm father, the son who had switched off, and Lavisa, who suddenly lived in a conversation about someone else's family. I didn't check her phone, didn't try to catch her in words. I didn't have a habit of living with suspicions. I just started noticing. A week later, she said again, "Today, I have a meeting with Pasha's father at school." "Yes, after school. It's late again, just a little bit." She carefully packed up again and left again, leaving the apartment not even empty, but rather with a sense of anticipation, as if our home was no longer a dot, but a platform. She goes where something is happening, and returns as a different person. She returned closer to 10. And this time she didn't have a folder in her hands, only her phone. She held it the way she holds something important, but tries not to show that it's important. "Well?" I asked. She smiled, barely noticeable. And that smile hit me harder than if she had come in tears. "Pashka stayed after school for the first time today," she said. "He didn't run away, he just sat there. We were talking." Quote, "You," I clarified. "The three of us," she answered and immediately added. "Andre was here too. He brought him a bun, can you imagine?" A grown man is standing there with a bag with a bun in his hand and looking at his son as if he is afraid that he will disappear now. She spoke and became animated. A warmth appeared in her voice that had not been there at home for a long time. I listened and understood one simple thing. She had not felt needed by me for a long time, and then she felt it. "Andre asked for my number," she said suddenly, as if in passing, so that if anything he could write about Pasha. "I gave it to him. That's it, not a scandal." "No, I found the correspondence, just one phrase, said as a technical detail. But I immediately understood, this is already a step." "Have you written already?" I asked. Larissa looked up. Something cautious flashed in them. "No, well, just thank you after the meeting." "Nothing like that," she said, "nothing like that," too quickly. "Okay," I said, "the main thing is that it's to the point." "To the point," she repeated, but her voice became a little quieter. She went into the bedroom, and I remained in the kitchen, looking at her mug, which she hadn't finished. Inside, there was no feeling of betrayal, not yet. It was the feeling of someone carefully opening the door to my apartment, not banging on it, not knocking it down, just inserting a key and quietly turning it. And this key is not sex, nor passion, nor romance, this key is trust. I didn't know then that the betrayal of smart women often begins exactly like this, with the fact that they finally listen to her, don't interrupt, don't judge, don't demand, just listen and thank her, and there is silence at home. And I was already beginning to understand that once this had started, it would be difficult to stop, because for the first time in a long time, Larissa had a reason to look forward to the evening. Later that night, when she was already asleep, her phone was lying face down on the nightstand. It vibrated briefly. Once, as if someone had pressed, I pressed the button carefully, so as not to wake him. I didn't pick it up, didn't turn it over, I simply heard the vibration and felt everything inside me grow colder. Larissa turned slightly in her sleep, reached out, felt for the phone, pulled it closer to her, and fell asleep again without opening her eyes. And I lay next to her and stared into the darkness, realizing that a third person had appeared in our apartment, even if now it was just the word thank you on the screen. At this point, for the first time, I thought, I shouldn't wait for trouble to happen. I need to start acting. But I still didn't know how. And while I was deciding this, morning was already creeping up on me, like footsteps in an empty entryway. The morning began normally. Coffee, short phrases, the sound of a hairdryer from the bathroom. But a new pause appeared in this ordinariness. Larissa began to answer with a delay, as if she were first reading something inside herself, and only then saying the words out loud. Quote, "Is there a parent-teacher meeting today?" I asked. No, she fastened her earrings in front of the mirror. Individual meetings. With whom? With different ones. She said this calmly. Too calmly. Before, she could list with the Kulikovs, with Masha's mom, with Petya's dad, now with different ones. This is not a lie, this is an oblique approach. I did not press. I generally don't like to press. But I began to remember. Time of leaving, time of returning, mood before and after. A couple of days later, I saw another detail. We were having dinner. She put the phone face down, casually, as usual. And suddenly, when it lit up, she instantly turned it over and put it in her pocket, without even looking at me. The movement was quick, practiced, unafraid, habitual. Who? I asked. A parent, she answered without looking. Quote, Sazonov. She looked up. A direct gaze for a second, then a slight irritation. Quote, yes, what? Nothing, just clarifying. She shrugged, but I saw something tensed inside her. Not because I guessed right, but because I started asking precise questions. That evening, she spoke up herself. Quote, Andre wants Pasha to take extra classes. He asked if I could recommend something. Did you recommend something? I asked. Yes. A psychologist, and she said I could stay after school a couple of times a week for free to brush up on the program. For free? I looked at her. It's a child, she answered sharply. Not everything can be measured in money. I nodded, but inside I noted something else. Twice a week after school, in the evening, when the school is almost empty. The head teacher knows, I asked. Of course, she answered, too quickly. I didn't bother to elaborate. I decided against any sudden movements. If something starts, you don't stop it by shouting, you stop it by understanding the mechanics. A week later, the extra classes became regular. Tuesday and Thursday. She came back around 9. Tired, but not squeezed out. There was something alive in her eyes. Even her skin seemed to have become lighter. I noticed that she puts on makeup more often in the mornings. Not brightly, just more neatly. Quote, You've started to look better, I said once. She froze for a second. That's bad. No, I just noticed. She looked in the mirror and quietly said, It's nice when someone notices. The phrase was ordinary, but there was someone in it. Not you, not my husband, someone. On Thursday, I decided to stop by the school without warning, not out of jealousy, but to check the facts. If it's a class, then it's a class. I parked opposite. The lights were burning in the second floor windows. Light. Larissa's office is third from the right. I saw silhouettes. 3. One small child, 2 adults. I stayed in the car, didn't go in, didn't want to make a scene, just watched. After 20 minutes, a small silhouette came out into the hallway, then into the street. I saw Pasha, thin, in a dark jacket. Next to him was a man, tall, in a black coat. They walked slowly. The man was saying something, leaning towards his son. The school door closed again. The light in Larissa's office remained on. I looked at the clock, 8:20. 5 minutes later, the man returned alone. This was no longer about a child. I felt everything inside me become cold and clear. Not anger, not panic, but clarity. The light in the office went out after 40 minutes. When Larissa came home, I was already sitting in the kitchen. Quote, How was class? I asked. Fine, she answered, taking off her coat. Pasha left early. She froze almost imperceptibly. Quote, Yes, Dad took it. And then he came back. Pause. What do you mean? Her voice grew harder. I was at the school, I said, calmly. I saw. She slowly turned to me. Her gaze was unafraid, appraising. Are you following me? Checking the information. She smiled briefly. This already sounds like an interrogation. I'm not shouting, I answered. I'm asking. She walked past me, sat down on a chair, and folded her hands on the table. He's back, she said. We were discussing the best way to organize a schedule so that Pasha wouldn't feel pressure. 40 minutes, I clarified. And how long do you think it takes to talk about the child? I looked at her and understood. Formally, she's right. Nothing I saw proves betrayal. Quote. But this is no longer about formality, this is about boundaries. Laris, I said quietly. Are you sure this is only about the child? She held my gaze. Are you sure you want to hear the answer? The phrase was dangerous. There was no justification in it. There was a challenge. Yes, I said. She looked away. I help him. And Pasha. That's it. Are you waiting for his messages? I asked. She was silent. Then he writes on business. I asked. Not that. The silence became thick. I saw a struggle going on in it, not between truth and lies, between the role of a teacher and something else. I am pleased, she said finally, that they thank me, that they listen to me, that my words have weight. With me, they don't, I asked. She looked at me long and honestly. You don't listen, you decide. I remembered these words because there was no accusation in them, they were a statement. That night we slept with our backs to each other, but this was no longer the silence of habit, it was the silence of a crack. The following Tuesday I went to the school again, but I didn't park opposite. I went inside. The security guard knew me by sight. I stopped by with Larissa a couple of times. To see Larissa Sergeevna, I said. Class is in progress, he replied. Wait. I walked down the hallway quietly. The classroom door was ajar. I stopped so I could see but not be seen. Pasha was sitting at a desk. Larissa was standing next to her, leaning over her notebook. Andre was sitting in the last desk. He wasn't looking at his son, but at her. It wasn't the look of a father looking at a teacher, it was the look of a man looking at a woman. When class ended, Pasha left first. I stepped aside. Andre came closer to Larissa. Too close for a parent. He said something quietly. She smiled. Unprofessional, different. And at that moment I realized that cheating doesn't start in bed. It starts right here, at a distance, 20 centimeters, which no one is obliged to close, but someone does. I left school before them. At home, I didn't make a scene. I waited. When she arrived, I was sitting in the dark. Why didn't you turn on the light? She asked. To see better, I replied. She stopped at the door. You were there again? Yes. And what do you want? I stood up so you could name it yourself. She looked at me. There was no fear in her eyes, only stubbornness. That's called support, she said. No, I replied. That's called crossing the line. She stepped forward. You have no right to control who I talk to, and you have no right to do this behind my family's back. The words hung between us. Quote, Nothing is happening, she said quietly. Bye. That for now sounded louder than any confession. I felt something inside me finally become solid. Not hysteria, not pain, but a decision. If something happens, I said calmly, there will be no turning back. She didn't answer. And at that moment her phone vibrated briefly again in her pocket. She didn't even look at me, she just took it out, read the message, and smiled. It was unnoticeable, but I saw it, and I understood. The next step wouldn't be mine. After that evening, she stopped making excuses. That was the most dangerous thing. When a person makes excuses, they still feel guilty. When they stop, it means they've already made a decision inside. On Tuesday, she didn't say she'd be late, she just wrote briefly during the day. I'm staying after school today, don't wait for dinner. Before, she'd called and explained, now she was just stating something. I didn't answer. I started counting not her words, but the connections. When a person lies, they get confused. When they're on the verge of cheating, they stop noticing details. That evening, I didn't go to school, I went to a cafe across the street. A small one with a yellow sign and a hinged door. Teachers always sit there after meetings. Coffee, cake, complaints about the children. I took a table by the window. At 8:20, I saw them. Pasha came out first. Andre leaned toward him, said something, and patted him on the shoulder. His son walked off toward the bus stop. Andre didn't leave. He stood there for a few seconds, then turned back toward the school. A minute later, Larissa came out the door. They didn't hug or touch. They simply walked side by side, but the distance wasn't school appropriate, it was informal. She walked a little closer than necessary. They went into a cafe. I sat behind a column, seeing their reflection in the glass. They chose a table in the corner. Andre took off his coat and hung it over the back. Larissa adjusted her hair slowly, with a familiar movement I hadn't seen at home for a long time. They talked. I didn't hear dictionaries, but I saw facial expressions. She leaned forward, laughing quietly but sincerely. He listened, didn't interrupt, looked straight into her eyes. After 10 minutes, he covered her hand with his. She didn't remove it. That's it. No sex, no kissing, but there was already infidelity, because this touch had nothing to do with Pasha. I didn't get up, didn't approach. I paid and went out the back exit. At home, I sat in the dark and didn't think about how she'd betrayed me. I thought about the mechanic. Why him? Why now? The answer was simple. He was grateful. He needed, he listened. I provided. When she returned, I didn't ask where she'd been. The cafe is delicious, I said. She froze. What are you talking about? Yellow sign, normal cappuccino. Pause. She slowly took off her coat. Were you following? I watched. It's the same thing. No, I replied. The difference is in the goal. She sat down opposite me. And what is your goal? To understand, I said. Have you already crossed the line or are you just about to? She was silent for a long time. It was a conversation, she said. With his hand on his arm, he worries. For his son, for himself too. I nodded. And you? She looked up at me. There was no shame in them, there was something else in them. Thirst. She hesitated. I feel at ease with him. That was honesty. It's hard with me, I asked. It's stable with you. Stable. A word that sounds like a diagnosis. I stood up. If you want ease, tell me. No need to hide the school register. She also stood up. Nothing happened. It already happened, I answered. She turned away. You're being dramatic. I looked at her carefully. Larissa, if you want this man, say, I won't throw tantrums, but I won't live in an illusion. She pursed her lips. I don't know what I want. It was the truth, and that was the worst thing. The next week was a turning point. She began to stay late more often, not only on Tuesday and Thursday. Methodological advice appeared, preparation for the test, consultations. I didn't check every time. One was enough for me. She started going into her phone. Not hiding, just being there more than with me. One evening, I came up to her from behind. She was sitting on the couch, texting. I couldn't see the screen, but I saw her expression. A slight smile, concentration. Sazonov? I asked. She wasn't scared? Yes. To the point. Not only. That not only sounded calm, like a fact. And what exactly, not only, I asked. She turned to me. He told me that he hasn't slept well since his wife left, that he's afraid of repeating her mistakes, that he doesn't understand how to be a man and a father at the same time. Do you understand? I asked. I'm listening. And he's grateful. Yes. And you? She looked at me intently. I like it when a man isn't afraid to talk about weakness. I felt everything inside go cold. I didn't talk about weakness because I didn't see the point. Because you think it's unnecessary, he said, Anya. Because I don't want to shift my problems onto you. But I want, she replied, for you to share them with me. That's it. Not sex, not passion. A request for emotional involvement. And you're ready to destroy a family for this? I asked. She looked away. No one destroys anything as long as we've already said this word. It hung between us like a warning. On Friday, I returned home earlier than usual. The apartment was empty. There was a note on the table. I'll be late, don't wait up. Not at class, not at school. I'll just be late. I didn't call. At 9 o'clock, I drove to the cafe, they weren't there. I drove to school, the lights were out. I returned home. At 10:40, the door opened. She entered quietly. Been somewhere? I asked. With Andre, without a pause. Where? In the car. My heart didn't speed up. I just registered it. Were we talking? She nodded, and she looked straight at me. He kissed me. Silence. Did you answer? I asked. She closed her eyes for a second. Yes. Now the betrayal was a fact. But I knew that was not all. And then, I asked. She was silent. I did not raise my voice. Larissa, what next? She opened her eyes. We stopped. I looked at her carefully. Because you didn't want to or because you were scared? She didn't answer, and in that silence, I understood. This is not the end. This is the beginning. I walked past her into the kitchen and poured myself some water. If you continue, I said calmly, without turning around, there will be no turning back. She stood in the hallway without taking off her shoes. Do you think it's that simple? She asked quietly. No, I answered. I think it's already complicated. She finally took off her boots. I'm confused. No, I said, you choose. She said nothing. And at that moment, her phone vibrated again. She didn't look at me, she just took it out. The screen was reflected in the hallway mirror. I saw a name. Andre. She swiped her finger across the screen. I'll be right back, she said and went out onto the balcony. The door closed. I came closer and saw through the glass how she spoke quietly, pressing the phone to her ear and smiling. And I realized the next step wouldn't be in the car. It would be where there were no longer any witnesses, and I had to decide whether to wait or act. I didn't go out onto the balcony, I didn't listen. I had already heard enough. When she returned to the room, I was sitting at the table without shouting, without a scene. She looked at me as if awaiting the verdict. I don't want to lie, she said first. This isn't just talk anymore. I know, I answered. She hesitated. We agreed to meet tomorrow. Where? I asked. At his place. Now everything has become completely clear. Not the car, not the cafe, the house. Will Pasha be home? I asked. No, he's at Grandma's for the weekend. She said it quietly, as if she knew it sounded the worst possible way. I nodded. So you've decided everything. She sat down opposite me. I didn't plan it this way. It just happened. No, I interrupted calmly. It didn't happen. It was building up, step by step. She lowered her eyes. I'm not afraid to be weak with him. But with me? She looked straight ahead. With you, I have to be strong. These words were precise and cruel. Fine, I said. Then tomorrow you'll go to him and make your choice. Just don't have any illusions, she remained silent. If you go there, I continued, you won't come back. Will you kick me out? She asked. No, I'll leave. And I knew I wasn't bluffing. On Saturday, she got ready calmly, without fuss, without hysteria. A neat dress, not provocative, but emphasizing her figure. Her hair was loose. The last time I saw her like this was many years ago, when we were still trying to like each other. What time will you be back? I asked. She didn't answer right away. I don't know. That's all. The door closed. I didn't go after her. I didn't stand under the windows. I didn't torture myself with fantasies. I just sat at home and thought about how cheating isn't a betrayal of the body, it's a betrayal of priorities. She chose where she needed it most. Around evening, she returned. I immediately understood, by the way she walked, by her gaze, because she avoided the mirror. You were with him? I said. She nodded without excuses. Yes, it was once, I asked. She closed her eyes. Yes. I looked at her carefully. Not as a husband, but as a person who records a fact. Do you regret it? She was silent for a long time. I don't know, she said finally. It wasn't like I thought. Better, I asked. No, she answered. Simply different, without a role, without school, without salvation. Just a man and a woman. And that's all. She sat down. Afterwards, he became different. He immediately asked what next. He said he didn't want to ruin his son's life, that Pasha was more important to him now, that he wasn't ready for serious changes. I nodded. It was predictable. So, I said, you destroyed your family for a man who isn't ready to destroy his. She didn't answer. He said it's better for us to distance ourselves, she added quietly, so as not to harm the child. That was the final blow. Not for me, but for her. They're already whispering at school, she said a minute later. Someone saw us in the cafe. The head teacher called and said that reputation is important. I listened in silence. She suggested writing a resignation. Quote, have you written it? I asked. Yes, and at that moment, everything became quiet. There was no shouting, no breaking of dishes. It felt like the house was simply empty. Quote, I thought I was saving the child, she said suddenly, that I was giving him an example of normal adult communication. That I was supporting his father. I looked at her. Quote, you were saving yourself, I said. She looked up. There was no challenge or passion in them, only weariness. Quote, probably, she whispered. I got up. I'll pack my things today. She shuddered. Are you leaving? Yes. Just like that. No, I answered. Not simple. Logical. She lowered her head. And if I say I was wrong? You weren't wrong, I said. You chose. The silence became final. I packed my bag calmly, unhurriedly. She sat in the room and didn't interfere. Sometimes I heard her walking around the apartment, as if she was blaming what was left of her old life. When I approached the door, she went out into the hallway. Quote, do you hate me? She asked. I looked at her for a long time. No, I'm just not your man anymore. She nodded. I left. A month later, I learned that Andre had transferred Pasha to another school. The rumors died down quickly. The school was alive with new scandals. Larissa was left without a job, without power, without trust, without a role. He didn't come back to her, didn't build a new life. He had a son and the usual fear of responsibility. Sometimes I think about her, about how it all began. Phrases, he just listens. Cheating doesn't always start in bed. It begins the moment someone gives you a sense of importance you don't get at home. And if you don't stop there, everything happens almost automatically. Larissa is alone. Andre is with his son. I am in a rented apartment. Nobody won. She thought she was saving the child, but in reality she was trying to save herself. And everyone had to pay for it. Yeah,